Well, howdy there, guys. Looks like I've been tagged by Running with Comics to do this For Creators video. So there's already another tag video going out, but the idea of this tag video, I guess, is to talk about sort of the four creators who helped get you into comics. This is a really hard question for me. I was thinking back and trying even to remember how I got into comics. I think I've been reading steadily for like 2 or 3 years, and on and off sort of before that, just occasionally for 3 or 4 years before that. So I have a hard time. It's really blurry to me when I really got into it hardcore. But I can remember when the Watchmen movie came out. I remember seeing the preview and being just like, what the fuck is this movie? This is friggin' weird. And then during the trailer, it says, based on the #1 selling graphic novel of all time. And I had never in my life heard of The Watchmen. So I was like, really? How is this so popular? And I've never heard of it. So I did watch the movie eventually, and I loved it. And then, of course, I went out and grabbed this from the bookstore. So this was the first graphic novel I ever purchased, The Watchmen #1, and loved it. It gives you a lot more depth in the story. I love the journal entries by the original Owl. Yeah, I love the pirate ship story. Is it called The Black Sail or The Black Pearl or something? That's kind of strewn throughout the whole story. It's just so wonderfully, amazingly done. I think of it as a masterpiece. And it really raised the bar for my expectations on what comics or graphic novels can be like. Obviously, the cast of characters, everything in this book is just incredible. There's the pirate story there. From like Rorschach, I love. The Owl is like the straight man. The imagery used, that's obviously not, well, it's probably part of Alan Moore's say, but yeah, it's just, it really blew my mind, and it opened my mind to what comics really could be at the time. So very important to me. And since then, like Alan Moore, just everything I read from Alan Moore I love. I've been working on the Swamp Thing run lately. Killing Joke, obviously. I just read V for Vendetta, which I loved as well. So Alan Moore, definitely, he's one of the guys who got me into comics and keeps me into comics. Interesting thing about The Watchmen, this, in fact, almost killed superhero comics because it was one of the first really realistic takes on superheroes. Like, what if superheroes were in sort of a more realistic world, that with all the violence and death and the good guys not always winning. He just sort of did this psychological exploration of who those characters were and would have been. And it turns out they're all kind of somewhat psychotic. A very fascinating take, but sort of after this happened, a lot of people sat back and said, like, okay, well, what do we do now? He's sort of deconstructed the superhero element so much that we can't go back and make the fun characters we've done because no one's going to look at it as being that believable anymore. There's Grant Morrison in his book Super Gods talks about it a little bit. It's pretty interesting, sort of what kind of came after that and how the superhero genre in the 90s sort of had to rediscover itself. And a lot of that ended with, like, if you read Kingdom Come, that takes a look at a lot of that too and helped usher into the era we have now, which it's sort of, it's okay with being fantasy and fun and otherworldly, and it doesn't always have to be dark and gritty and everything. But I'm off topic. Alan Moore, definitely a writer who got me very much into comics and keeps me there today. After I was sort of starting to get into comics, I started adding books to my pull list, things like that, and I went away prawn fishing as I do, so I'm gone on a boat for like 8 weeks, and I downloaded a whole bunch of comics to read on the boat. Illegally, which I don't suggest people do. I think it's better just buy the books. To make amends, I've been trying to buy the entire run of Invincible, but that's also because I just really love this series. But so I read the first like 50 issues of Invincible on there and just love this book. This is a Robert Kirkman book. He also created Walking Dead. And just the way he does the arcs of these stories, he takes a lot of familiar superhero elements, but he mixes it with sort of those real-world problems of a kid. It's sort of about this kid, Mark, who realizes his father's a superhero and that one day he'll be getting his superpower. So when he's like 17, they start appearing, and it's him going through his journey of, okay, what does it mean to be a superhero? How do I use these abilities? How do I really help people? And he deals with a lot of heavy-duty questions of family and power, the power and responsibility questions. I know Robert Kirkman's a big fan of Spider-Man, so I find there's a lot of sort of Spider-Man elements in there, or I should say Peter Parker elements. The universe he builds is a lot of fun. The adventures they get into and stuff are all good with a bit of depth to the story. So that's really what I like in comics. I like to have fun. I like to be entertained, but I like it to have a little bit more than just what's on the surface. So like the Amazing Spider-Man Dan Slott run, I find is a lot of fun. He's really good at that, but it just lacks the depth that I like. There's just not a lot more to it than what's on the surface. Argue that with me if you like. But yeah, so Invincible, just love this series. Started off with a guy named Corey Walker. He did the character design. So this book is actually signed by Kirkman, Walker, and Crabtree, who are the three creators. Corey Walker's art I don't love, but I think at issue like 14 or something, Ryan Otley took over. So he's an incredible artist. He's really good at drawing gore and violence. His friggin' bone is sticking out of his arm and stuff. Again, it's more about Robert Kirkman. The way he layers his stories as well are really good. He's always got something coming, something happening, and dealing with something in the past, if that makes sense. So you always, even though the story is going on and you're into that, you know there's something else coming. He leaves these little breadcrumbs and these trails and these hints that something bigger and worse is coming, and it keeps you reading it as you go. So really great. $2.99 book as well, which I love. And Kirkman, I've also read like all the Walking Dead stuff. My friend has all the trades, so I've read through all those. I do like The Walking Dead as well, although not as much as Invincible. With that, again, he explores a lot of this idea of humanity and how we deal with death and destruction of the world, all these obvious things. Yeah, so not too much else to say about Robert Kirkman. Just think he's a really great writer. I watched The Walking Dead TV show, for example, and I find there's a lot of these filler episodes they do that are just weak ass shit. But there's ones they do that are based directly off Robert Kirkman books, like when Carl had to deal with being by himself after his dad Rick is knocked out on the couch in a coma, basically, and it's all just based around Carl, that episode, and how he's dealing with becoming a man, how he's dealing with his relationship with his father. He hates him, but he loves him. Does he need him? And it's an incredibly powerful episode, and that's taken straight out of the comics, and I think it's just a testament to the writing. I really wish TV shows and things would use some of these writers more, because they're so lacking often. Like, I've been trying to get to Gotham, and it drives me mental because the writing is so weak compared to some of these great writers. So Robert Kirkman is my second creator I really, really love. All right, number 3. Sorry with the glare here, guys. I'm actually filming the day. I usually film at nighttime, but filming the day because everybody's out of the house right now. So you got to deal with a bit of glare. But this is Batman number 1 of the Scott Snyder run. So again, when I had started adding books to my pull list and things, I think it was on issue number 10 of this run. So this is the first book I bought off the rack, and then I added it to my pull list. So I've really enjoyed this run. It got me really into Batman as a comic book character, which I had loved the movies and stuff in the past, but this run's really what got me into regularly reading Batman. I've discovered lots of great stuff, back issues and current stuff. But Scott Snyder, I find I really enjoy his writing, but like any writer or many writers, they sort of tend to fall into similar patterns and things like that. Sometimes that gets on my nerves a little bit, but like he tends to get all his characters do these sort of monologues where they're talking about history and these past things. Did you know that 50 years ago, like, these stones were used by nomads to whatever? They give you some history lesson, which is sometimes interesting, but I just find it sometimes gets a little repetitive. His current series or run, Endgame, is really great. I've been enjoying that. A lot of fun, interesting exploration of the Joker character, as well as seeing, I love when Batman fights all the Justice League and everything. That doesn't get old. You could do that every few years. I'd be happy. But yeah, I find a lot of his like one-shots I really like. This was the number 2 annual this story just on its own, it's sort of an exploration of Arkham and this old witchy character and stuff. Scott Snyder likes to do that. He brings these really old characters out of the woodwork from like the Golden Age. So that's been a lot of fun. I find just his one-shots are really, really great. But yeah, this was, I think, the first book I added to my pull list and really consistently liked. And I haven't stopped picking it up since I've started. So I tend to get bored fairly easily if stuff gets too repetitive. And I find I'm dropping and adding different books all the time. So Scott Snyder has survived that. So he's really great. That's number 3. All right, last and certainly not least, I'm going to go with Brian K. Vaughan. I could almost have gone with Fiona Staples as well. On this book, they're absolutely 50-50 tag team for, I think, the reason of why this book is so great. I really enjoy both of their work, but this was, I remember looking at like issue 5 on the rack and being like, this is weird. This is the kind of stuff I want to get into. And I ended up adding this to my list and then I just got online a whole bunch of the back issues and really have enjoyed this book. Brian K. Vaughan, he does a great job with characters. He often has these strong female characters. In this, it's interesting because in their relationship, she's the much more like dominant, masculine fighter type, where he's sort of the sensitive one. And it makes a really interesting, fun dynamic. It explores sort of bigger issues, even in this like super crazy cosmic universe that they live in. It's very much like a Star Wars universe. There's just strange, weird creatures everywhere, which is a lot of fun. Again, he creates some of those creatures, but so does Fiona Staples. And even though it seems so surreal and otherworldly, it deals with very real issues of family, life, politics, war, peace, violence, so many things that I just find so fascinating. And the one thing with Brian K. Vaughan is he loves comics. Like when he made Saga, he gets pissed about people talking about turning Saga into a movie and stuff, because he's like, no, I made Saga because I wanted it to be a comic book. I don't want it to be a movie. And the way I write it and the way I create it, I don't do it so that it will become a movie. It just wouldn't work as a movie. So I really respect that about him. He does a lot of things where he pushes the boundaries and tries different things. He also wrote Why the Last Man, which I've read the whole run, which is really good as well, sort of dealing with a post-apocalyptic world where all the men die except for one, this guy named Yorick. So fascinating book. Also, he recently created an online digital comic where he made it free or was pay what you want. So sort of pushing the boundaries of what do you charge, how much should people be expected to pay, would a pay what you want strategy work? I don't think in the long term it would work. I think it would ultimately lower the value of the books, but you never know. It tends to work for music and stuff to a certain extent, and maybe makes a more broad group of creators rather than a smaller group on the top that make a lot of money. Spreads the wealth out a little bit, possibly. Yeah, so this was the first sort of Image series I read, something that was non-superhero, and I just loved it, and it showed me so much of what comics could do, how much farther comics could go than just sort of what traditionally you may think of in terms of like your classic Spider-Man, Marvel, DC stuff. So, and I think this series specifically to me is, I think, a start of a new age in comics, in that all these sort of major creators all of a sudden started making their own Image, create their own books, and really good stuff, where I find a lot of the older Image stuff is it feels sort of amateurish. It's these newer writers trying to crack in, trying to do something different, newer artists, and they just don't have their skills honed yet. A lot of it's still good, exploring interesting ideas, but Brian K. Vaughan seems like he started the trend where guys like Hickman and Matt Fraction, guys like these, started making their own books that were really, really solid because they have that experience as well as the great ideas and the freedom to do whatever they like. So Saga's great, pushes the boundaries. Every issue of this, it opens up with something shocking, and just whether it's weird or offensive or confusing or whatever, it's always pushing the boundaries, which I think is a huge reason I love Brian K. Vaughan. Is he really is an artist. He's trying to do different things. He's trying to push things to the next limit, and often it ends with a pretty good cliffhanger as well. No ads in there, no nothing. So just love Saga so much, and love Brian Caveon, and I think this is his best work. I've also read a bunch of Ex Machina, which is really good, about sort of an ex-superhero who becomes a politician. Brian Caveon. So that is going to be my 4 creators. Alright guys, so that is going to be my 4 creators tag, and I'm going to tag Crane's Comics, 604 Comics, and let's go with Flipping Tables Over, FTO. So I'd love to see your guys' 4 creator videos. If you haven't done one yet, I don't think you guys all have. So that's going to be it. Thanks guys so much, and we will catch you later.